Hey everyone, my name is Michelle. I'm a therapist in the Seattle, Washington area. And today I'm going to be answering the question, how can I support my partner while they are grieving? So I feel like with the things that I'm going to talk about today in order to answer this question, these are things that can apply to anyone who you're supporting in a grief process, whether it is your romantic partner, whether it's a friend, another family member, a coworker. These are good rules of thumb no matter what, especially the first two. The third one may be as applicable. That might not apply to every situation. But there are two big things that I want to talk about today. And the first thing that's really important when you are trying to support somebody who is grieving a loss of any kind, that's the other thing that's really important to mention, is that grief does not just happen when we lose someone to death. Grief can happen when there's a big life transition going on of some sorts. Grief can happen when we lose a job unexpectedly. Grief can happen when we move. Grief can happen for lots of different changes. So even though we stereotypically think about grief when someone dies, grief can be about lots of other events as well. So the first thing that I recommend when it comes to supporting someone who's grieving is making sure that you are listening and not fixing. A lot of times it's uncomfortable to sit with someone who is grieving. We don't know what to do. And to be honest, there's not a whole lot we can do to make it better. If it's about someone who died, we can't bring that person back to life. If it's about a move that's happened, well, that may not be something that can be undone. Or a job that's lost, maybe you can't go back even if you wanted to. So there's an uncomfortability about sitting with somebody who is grieving because we feel very powerless a lot of times in those moments. And a lot of times, what someone who is grieving needs is just to have somebody listen if they want to talk. Just hear them out without trying to make it better. You have the best shot of making it better by just sitting and listening rather than trying to fix it, rather than making suggestions for what they should do with their grief or what they should try in order to move on, which is a term that I hate and I think lots of people hate. Grief isn't something that you move on from. So there's a lot of expressions in our culture that are less than helpful, such as saying, well, it happened for a reason and things like that. So to really refrain from trying to say anything to fix it or do anything to fix it, to really do a whole lot of listening. And if you find it weird to listen and not say anything, one of the best things that you can just say is, I'm here for you. That's one of the best things you can say, and your actions are showing that. So that's the first thing I recommend. Do a lot of listening, refrain from fixing. The second thing that I recommend is that if you do want to do something for this person, ask if it would be okay. Don't just show up at their door with a casserole unannounced. That may not be what's helpful. Ask before you try to do anything, even if it's just wanting to give them a hug. Ask if it's okay. Say, is it all right if I give you a hug? You know, part of me was thinking about bringing you a meal. Would you like that, or is that something you would rather I not do? Ask before you take any kind of action. Because as powerless as you might feel as the person who is trying to be there for the one who's grieving, they may feel powerless as well because they just had a loss of some kind. And so this gives them a sense of control. Now, if this is your partner, right, and that was specifically what this question was about, is if it's your partner. So let's assume that you live together, you're with each other every day. I think it's still important to do some asking, to not treat them like they are helpless. To not feel like, well, since they're grieving, I have to take on all the cooking and all the cleaning and all the bills, and I have to do everything and take it all off their plate and shift it onto mine, because that may not be what that person needs with their grief. They may find it really helpful to still try to maintain a sense of normalcy, and maybe they would be the ones who would prefer to do the cooking. So just asking, hey, do you want me to cook dinner tonight? Do you want us to cook it together? Can I help you with this? Would you prefer I not help you with that? Just ask questions and give choices rather than just forging ahead and thinking that you know what's best or what they need. So that's the second thing I recommend. Make sure you ask before taking any steps to try to be there for them. And the third thing, with which I just touched on a little bit, and again, sometimes this is going to apply, sometimes this isn't. But chances are, if this is your romantic partner who is grieving, who they are grieving may have had an impact on your life too. For example, let's say your partner's parent died, their mom or their dad died. And they're naturally probably going to be struggling a little bit. And you may think to yourself, oh, well, their grief is bigger than mine, and put your own grief on the back burner. But chances are, if you were close to, or if you knew the person who passed, you're going to have your own grieving process as well to contend with. And this happens sometimes. People minimize their own grief in an attempt to be there for someone else. And this is a way that they are coping more often than not. But the third and final thing that I recommend is, if you knew the person who passed, if it is that kind of a loss, to really make sure that you are attending to your own grief. Again, this may not apply so much to if your partner lost their job or things like that, even though there may be some of that as well, because that certainly can affect you. Maybe you both moved and your partner is grieving where you used to live, but maybe you are as well. And so it's really important to make sure that you are taking care of your grief and not just shouldering the burden for them and neglecting your own needs. So this is where it's great to have a therapist you can talk to about your feelings. This is where it's also really helpful if you have friends or family members, people who don't know the person who died, or who have not really been affected in any way by the loss or change that the two of you have had in your life, to talk about it with someone else and to make sure that you are taking care of yourself first and foremost before trying to take care of your partner. If there are certain things that you can't take on and you're not up to it, don't pressure yourself to take them on. Be honest with your partner about the things that you can do to support them and the things that are still going to be on their plate despite the grief that may be going on. If you have a question for me about love or relationships, send it to me in an email, nextchapter.michelle@gmail.com. Thanks, everyone.